This story takes place 15 years ago during my freshman year of high school. I am now 30, married to my high school sweetheart, and we are expecting our first baby sometime this December. Needless to say, I haven't thought about this experience in years. Truth be told, I don't want to think about it, and I'm pretty freaked out right now. This started a couple of days ago when my husband and I were watching TV when somebody knocked on the front door. This wasn't too unusual. It was like 3 in the afternoon and we tended to get regular visits from the ministers down the street. However, when my husband opened the door, there was an envelope wedged between the door and the wreath hanging on it. Our curiosity got the better of us and we didn't debate long about opening the unaddressed envelope. Upon opening it, we discovered it contained a class picture of our freshman year, except everyone but this girl in my class, Emily, and my face was scribbled out with a black marker. As memories started flooding in, I almost had a heart attack when I remembered who Emily was and how I realised we aren't safe if she knows where we live. Emily was, and as far as I know still is, very strange. In 5th to 9th grade she played with dead animals, wore Ouija board patterned dresses and got into lots of fistfights. The strangest part though was how everyone who got on her bad side, and anyone else there to witness, would hear her scream, "You'll be sorry," and the very next day the recipient of that phrase would go missing. Please understand, we lived in a very nice area and it wasn't the kind of place you'd expect anyone, let alone children, go missing. Over 4 years, 5th to 8th grade, a total of 3 people went missing and all 3 received Emily's claim, "You'll be sorry," the day before their disappearances during a fistfight. 2 were found 48 hours after their disappearance, and the 3rd wasn't found until the following week, about 8 days. Their recovery locations were fairly close to each other, and they seemed physically unharmed, but they weren't ever the same. They would refuse to tell and would start screaming and crying when asked about what happened. The police wrote it off as a kidnapper that traumatized them with mental and emotional abuse, but I strongly disagree. I think it was Emily. The weeks following their recoveries, she always seemed to be in a brighter mood, and once the victims returned to school, they never talked to her again and even avoided her. Just my luck. It was my turn to make her mad in 9th grade. We had a couple of classes together. I tried to avoid her for the most part, but on this particular day, I ended up being forced to be partners with her for a project. We had 4 weeks to finish the project and we agreed to do our parts independently for 2 weeks and spend the remaining 2 weeks combining and finishing the project. No problem, right? Wrong. 2 weeks go by and she said she still needed to start and we could combine on the 3rd week. 1 week goes by and she demanded I do both parts and finish the project myself in a week. I told her I did when I turned in the project, but I actually only turned in my half and told our teacher what happened. Big mistake. That project was worth 50% of our grade, and because she didn't do her part of the project, she failed the class and would have to redo the class in 10th grade. I felt my stomach drop to my feet when I saw her charging past me in the hall screaming, "You'll be sorry." Long story short, my boyfriend drove me home. I couldn't sleep at all that night, which ended up being a good thing because I was already wide awake when police lights started flashing through my curtains. The house adjacent to mine had been broken into. The news announced that morning that nothing was taken, no one was harmed, and the perpetrator entered the home through a teen girl's window. Was it Emily? I don't know, but I don't think it was a coincidence that the house next to mine was broken into, especially in our nice neighbourhood, and they didn't take anything or hurt anyone. Another reason, if not the main reason, why I think it was Emily, is because Emily never showed up to school again. She just vanished and no one knew where she went. A disturbing thought just hit me. If it was Emily, she didn't anticipate getting the wrong house. Thank God she got the wrong house. Here I am 15 years later and still scared of her and what she might do. I'm pregnant and hormonal to top it all off. Needless to say, for the past few days I have had my mum and some friends come stay with us, and I don't leave my house without being accompanied by at least 2 other people. Kudos to the people who read my whole story. I know it was a lot. I might keep you all up to date if you liked it and want to know more. Thanks. Hi, my name is Angel and I'm 19 years old. I want to share my paranormals with you guys, since the people around me don't experience the same things as me, so I also want to hear your stories as well. My sister is the one who can see ghosts, ever since she was a kid. She's 8 years older than me, so she's probably 25 or 26 now. I was around 9 or 10 years old at the time when the tappers stopped bothering us, and my sister noticed 2 demons had come to visit our house. She told my mum that they were really ugly, and if you were to see them, you'd probably shit bricks. Since she has seen things that are scary, she wouldn't even bother looking and looked the other way. She also told us they'd brought 2 dogs. They looked like dogs but weren't really dogs, she said. That their eyes looked like human eyes, not the type of eyes a dog would have, and their body didn't look like a dog's either. They were abnormally big to be dogs. My sister explained and told us about how there was a little girl from the age of 9 to 12 in a white dress with pale skin and black hair, but she had no eyes. Because of this, she suspected that it was a demon. There was another entity that was with the demon. It was a German man who was also pale-skinned and was wearing a weird uniform. She said that the man wasn't a demon, but a ghost out to do malicious things. My first encounter with the Gigglers, I was with my sister and my mum. My sister and I shared a room and had a bunk bed. I slept on top and she slept on the bottom. The ghosts proclaimed they wanted to hurt my mother, so she started sleeping with my sister. It was around 11 or 12 at night on either a Thursday or Friday, and I heard a faint crying sound coming from the attic. I was sleeping on the top of the bunk bed, so my face is somewhat close to the ceiling to the attic. The faint crying got a bit louder, and as soon as I was able to hear this crying more clearly, I realized that there wasn't crying, it was giggling. My eyes widened and my heart started to pound loudly. My sister woke up suddenly and told my mum that the demons were all here already. The Giggler's voice echoed in the room. As scared as I was and knew they wouldn't do anything, I pretended to be sleeping so that I wouldn't bother both my sister and my mum. They started praying to the Archangel. The Gigglers started to laugh louder as they were praying. I covered my ears and covered the blanket over my head. They were so loud and scared the living soul out of me. After a few minutes passed, the giggling started to fade to the point where they stopped and seemed to have gone back to their world again. Since then, I'm pretty sure those demons noticed that I'd noticed them, and I became their target. I was probably in the 8th grade when I experienced the Gigglers for the last time. I was playing a computer game called Wizard 101 around 4 in the afternoon. I was in a dungeon called Waterworks and nearing the final. Suddenly I heard someone giggling. The giggling didn't come from the same floor, it was coming from the attic. At this point I knew whoever was laughing knew that I could hear them. I remembered my eldest sister telling me that there used to be kids living in the house and they liked to laugh at her in a way that would be trying to scare her. This was my 4th time hearing them, but my first time experiencing this alone. Already with fear in my eyes, knowing that I was their target, I raised the game volume and continued playing. The giggling grew a bit louder and I started hearing small footsteps upstairs. I continued playing, ignoring the extra noises, to the point where I realized the laughing had stopped. I looked around through the corners of my eyes and listened for any other noises. I lowered the game volume a bit because it was now too loud. After a few more minutes in the game, I heard their final laugh. It was so loud and a bit deeper than before. Their voice echoed through the floor and they went downstairs to the basement. I bolted off of my chair. My legs were trembling so much I couldn't walk, and I was too scared to make a move. Everything went so fast I couldn't do anything. I somehow got the courage to scream, "Get out of my house! You don't belong here anymore!" My older brother, who was in his room playing Call of Duty, opened his door and walked towards me. "What's going on? Why are you screaming like that?" I stared at him with fear in my eyes and said, "They were here again." My older brother was staring at me in bewilderment. Then suddenly, when he was about to open his mouth to speak, One of the ceiling light bulbs exploded. I jumped up from the floor from the noise. My brother, who was standing beneath the light, just looked down to his left shoulder and said, "What the fuck?" and cleared the glass debris off his shoulder. My brother looked at me and said, "Come on, let's go to my room." I exited out of my game console and went inside my brother's room. I got into his bed and slept whilst he played Call of Duty. That was the last and final time I have seen or heard of the kids who used to live in the house. During my high school years, the house was peaceful for a while, until the smell of death started coming from the basement, and I would hear dogs inside and outside of the house. A tip for those experiencing negativity in their home: go to your local church and get some blessed water. Spray it anywhere you feel isn't right. There is a higher power out there that can protect you. You should never be scared inside of your own home. This is a true story, and I'm mainly posting this to see if anyone can tell me what the hell it was. So it all started when I was about a year old, and my family moved into a haunted house. You could hear things being dragged around in the attic, and things would go missing, but nothing major. My brother, who was around 3, and I shared a room and experienced things like toys playing on their own, and we would hear random voices. My brother would also get up in the middle of the night and talk to my great-grandfather on the TV when there was nothing but static. We lived in that house for about a year, then moved into our new house where I lived until I was 20. After we moved, I was the only one who still experienced weird things. I would often tell my mum about the old man that was in my closet. A few times a week I would see what I could only describe as a weird-looking old man that would peek out of my closet and tell me to come with him. As I got older, the figure would distort more and more and come further out of the closet, always trying to get me to come with him. The older I got, the closer it would get to me, and the more violent it would get. I would often have nightmares and wake up with scratches and bruises on me. Then, when I was about 19, it got really bad. It started with 3 dreams. On the first night, I had a dream where I was panicking and looking out of my front door to see a pitch-black figure with red eyes walking up my driveway. I slammed the door and locked it. On the second night, it was the same dream, but the thing was closer. On the third night, it was again the same dream with the thing even closer, but this time I didn't lock the door. 3 days after the last dream, I woke up in the middle of the night with a horrible feeling of something watching me. My dog started growling and I was ripped off my bed by my ankle and had a bruise of a handprint there for about a month. About a week after that, I was sitting in my bed on my laptop. It's about 1 a.m, and my dog started growling and barking like crazy. When I stood up to open my bedroom doors, something started to pound on it to the point of making it shake. Shortly after it started, I just passed out, and when I woke up, I was covered in scratches and bruises again. Maybe about a month after I met my husband and moved in with him. The last time I saw the shadowy figure was a few weeks after moving in, and it was outside the house. I haven't had any incidents since then, but every now and then I get a creepy feeling like I'm being watched. I can go into more detail if anyone wants me to, but I really want to know what this thing was and why it followed me for so long, and stopped when I met my husband. My name tag reads, "Hi, I'm Jimmy, how can I help you?" I work at a gas station in a forgettable little town in Illinois, about 5 hours south of Chicago. When I was a kid, I never thought I'd end up working the graveyard shift 5 nights a week, 100 feet from the off-ramp. I always dreamed of being a firefighter or a teacher, even playing guitar in a rock band. But by your late 30s, you start to realize the difference between dreams and reality. I don't know whether it was my own bad luck or my inability to stick with college, but I was stuck working from 9 at night to 5 in the morning for my paycheck. Que sera, sera. You meet a lot of interesting people in my line of work. Maybe interesting isn't the best word. I'll just say there's a lot of characters roaming around at 2 in the morning. To tell the truth, I like the night shift. It's slower and I get paid an extra 75 cents an hour, though I haven't been robbed yet. and I'm sure looking down the barrel of a gun would change my tune. I have my regulars, and I've come to enjoy their company, mostly. Some I could do without. There's Scratchy. I don't know his real name, but he comes in around 11 nearly every night to buy $10 worth of instant lottery tickets. There's Mrs. Fletcher. She lives down the block and rolls up on one of those mobility scooters every week to get milk and cat food. Nice old lady. Made me a plate of cookies last Christmas. One of my favourites was Steve, and not because he was a great conversationalist. He wasn't, as far as I knew. I only know him from his name tag on his McDonald's uniform. He sometimes rolled in about 3:30 in the morning to get gas before his 4 a.m. shift. Whenever I saw good old Steve, I knew it wasn't long before I got to go home. Those are some of the nicer ones I get to interact with. Now let me tell you about one of the nasty ones. It was a Wednesday morning in early spring, I think. I was reading a horror anthology, King, Bradbury, Bloch, the usual suspects. An oldie but a goodie turned off Main Street and rolled up to the entrance. That's what I call classic cars. I always liked older cars, and since I started working here I would often glance through the many hot rod magazines we sold. I recognized it immediately. A 1978 Diamond Jubilee Edition Thunderbird, all black with tinted windows. A tall man with pale, drooping features stepped out. If I had to guess his profession from how he was dressed, I would say something like funeral director. A black suit jacket hung from his rigid frame. I noticed mud on his shoes and the hem of his slacks. I nodded and mumbled, "Hello." He walked to the aisles, ignoring my greeting as if I didn't even exist. He brought a box of garbage bags, a roll of duct tape, our biggest size bottle of Clorox bleach, and a hacksaw to the counter. And yes, we sell hacksaws. You'll find them between the ratchet sets and the shot glasses. I make it a rule not to think too hard about what people buy. It's none of my business unless it's an underage kid trying to buy booze or wannabe meth maker trying to buy up all our cold medicine or nail polish remover. The old guy's selection was suspicious, but suspicion and guilt are two different things. It wasn't until I rung him up that I got the uneasy feeling that comes so easily to someone who works alone late into the night. He pulled a small red purse from under his jacket and rifled through it. A long, uncomfortable moment later, he pulled out 2 $20 bills to pay for his stuff. I glanced at the purse in his hand and noticed a woman's driver's license among the jumble of items within. That wasn't really strange. Married couples often co-op each other's wallets, checkbooks, debit cards, and various other devices used for payment. It all went towards the family's needs anyway. But his 2 perceptive eyes caught mine looking. I counted his change, then handed it to him. He smiled, but it seemed more like he was baring his teeth. For whatever reason, he reminded me of a predatory animal gloating over a wounded prey. "Your name is Jimmy?" he asked. The accent was something I had never heard in real life, only in movies or television. It was something Eastern European, very thick too. "Yes," I replied. "Let me bag this up." I bagged it, then pushed it across the counter. "You work alone at night, do you?" I panicked, said nothing. He smiled again. "See you around, Jimmy." I was glad he was gone. I hoped I would never see him again. Some people just make your skin crawl, and I'll be damned if I could really tell you why. It wasn't his transaction, but his presence. Does that make sense? I'll admit it doesn't. Maybe I shouldn't read horror stories when I get bored at work. As my manager likes to say, if you've got time for learning, you got time for cleaning. 2 nights later I found myself grabbing the local paper. I saw a woman's face. The story was brief. She had left a bar 2 towns down the highway a couple nights earlier. She never got home. I didn't know this woman, but my mind insisted that I'd seen her face before. But the mind plays tricks. I see a lot of faces. Who am I to make a fuss without something better than a fleeting look at a woman's face on a driver's license? Spring turned to summer, and sometime in late June I had another visit from the man in the black Thunderbird. This time I knew I had seen something I shouldn't have. He walked inside stoically and made his way to the bathrooms in the back. I noticed his hands were coated in something red. I wanted to tell myself it was ketchup or maybe paint, but I knew it was blood. Tiny scarlet drops fell to the floor, creating an intermittent trail leading to the back of the gas station. I considered running to my forest green Cavalier, accentuated with Bondo and rust, but I choked down the rising terror, telling myself no one could be so audacious as to partake in a full deed than walk in public with blood-soaked hands. I reasoned that he must have injured himself, right? What murderer in his right mind would walk around with bloody hands for the world to witness? But murderers aren't in the right frame of mind. And is a gas station at 3 in the morning really that public? No one had been in for nearly 2 hours. I heard the bathroom door open and my whole body tensed. I stared, paralysed by the man's approach. Now his hands were clean and wet with water from the sink, but his face was decorated in thin lines of red that radiated out from the corner of his lips. He grabbed the local paper and the USA Today and tossed them on the counter. I must have stared too long. He dabbed his cheek delicately, then inspected the red spot on his finger. I suffer from gum disease, Jimmy. Hadn't he seen the blood around his lips? The fluorescent light in the bathroom is bright, almost overbearing, and there's 2 mirrors. One above the sink and a full-length mirror next to the little machine that sells cologne and condoms. He paid, then went outside. He placed the newspapers on the roof of his T-bird, then stood to peer into the night as if contemplating something. I watched him stand there for at least 5 minutes, watching the sky and occasionally sneering with his blood-smeared mouth. Then his body snapped into action, turning to rush back into the building. The automatic doors opened. I saw his face, but his animalistic smile was missing. He bared his teeth. I saw large canines set in his mouth like tiny white daggers. Before he could step inside, an SUV sped into the parking lot. The man in black retreated to his T-bird, started the car and drove into the night. I was never so glad to see a group of drunk club hoppers in my entire life. There's only one bar in the county that stays open until 4 in the morning. There had been an ordinance proposed to restrict last calls to midnight throughout the county. It was voted down. If it hadn't, I wonder if I would be alive to tell this story. They were a slightly obnoxious group. I think one of the guys stole a candy bar. The woman stared into the screens of their iPhones while I rung up their transactions. I wished them good night. They walked out not saying a word. They were my best customers of the night. In the parking lot were the bloody man's newspapers. All summer and into the fall I wondered if he was reading up on the people who went missing that summer. There were at least 2 in my part of Illinois, but people go missing all the time in America, all over the world really. Most of them disappear for good. I kept an eye out for the man in the black Thunderbird, but I haven't seen him again. However, something last night got my attention. I was reading Dante's Inferno, scary stuff. Steve had been by to get $10 in gas before his shift. I was looking forward to breakfast and sleep. I saw something move in the alley across the street. It was a long black car with its lights off, the kind they don't make anymore. It could have been a Mercury Cougar or Lincoln Continental, maybe even a Thunderbird. I would have quit this job long ago, but where would I have gone? I've got to pay the rent. Que sera, sera. I should be cleaning the bathrooms right now, or doing inventory, but I bought Bram Stoker's Dracula today. Think I'll read a few chapters first. No hurry really. The place is really dead tonight.